Thank you for joining me on Stable Roots this week. Today I'm going to be talking about story, how story is everything, and the narrative webs that weave us together. Podcasts are by their essence containers of stories, so I have two announcements that are a fitting share for the theme of this week's writings. It was a week of deep conversations and connections, sitting down with cups of tea and listening to wise women. It was an honor to share a table and a microphone with all of them. I'd love for you to listen to their words and join in the richness. You can also find these episodes on all your favorite podcast platforms. But I've got the Confident Writer podcast with Jane Pike, and she's holding a series of Christmas conversations, and all of them are wonderful. But I was so honored to be able to sit down with her and others this week, and you can find that on The Confident Writer. And then my podcast, Relatively Stable, I had finally the opportunity to sit down with Tamar Reno, and I could have a conversation with her every single day and every single week and record it and send it out into the world. But you can click on this post for Stable Roots and find links to the Confident Writer podcast and Relatively Stable, or you can just search for them and find them on all your favorite platforms. Let's get started. What's in a story? Don't slay me for saying this, but I really dislike Charles Dickens. Is it doubly bad saying this before Christmas? Or would Dickens be like, of all my stories, that one? But I'm sinking into his unforgettable opening line. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Because I can't find a better quote to sum up the last quarter of 2024 for me. These past months, I've had a lot of downtime, and these hours of being alone with my thoughts have made me hugely aware of my stories, the narratives we humans construct to make sense of the world. My story this year has been one of great joy and great upheaval. Story is everything. And I'm taking those words from Tamar Reno. Writers have permission to live in alternate realities. It's not a lie if it's art. And I'm here today to talk about stories, the timelines we choose to live in. We all do it. I wrote as a kid because I wanted to escape the reality I lived in. Horses and barns became the same kind of medicine for me as time went on. There's a mystery in the presence of the herd that invites us to think beyond our limitations, to consider a different way of being. When I first started taking the stories out of my head and putting them down on paper, someone accused me of having stolen the words or having made it all up. I still smart when I think about that. Having our story questioned is a really big deal. I can vividly remember the periods of my life that were consumed with stories, characters, landscapes, carved from my imagination and as real to me as the light from a sunset. These are liminal spaces, the in-between times of my world. My brain is balanced when I'm drifting in creative space. The whirling cyclones of my logical thoughts, constant, swirling, destructive, meet the sweeping robed dervishes of my subconscious. I've written before about how I'm an anxious traveler. Many years ago, I was deeply immersed in a story I was writing, and my ex-husband planned a sudden trip back home to Istanbul. I was expected to get the farm in order in a matter of days, arrange the trip, get finances in order, hop on a plane, and go. South Carolina to Turkey isn't a day trip. Just getting there takes 24 hours of flights. This trip should have hit all my triggers and made me a nervous wreck. But it didn't. I had a story in my head. I was in love with my characters, a criminal collection of international anti-heroes with sordid pasts, burgeoning redemption, and witty one-liners. My imagination was living my daily life through their lens. I might have looked like a farm girl on the outside, but my reality was so much more. I was guided by the story building inside my head. I packed my bags and with my best traveling clothes, downloaded an eclectic Baroque soundtrack, and boarded the plane to Turkey like I was the most interesting person in the world. Everyone in the airports became a potential character. Every view, a potential new scene. With the storyline in my head, I got out of my usual nest of fears, and I lived life boldly, like I belonged there. This way of traveling was so directly opposite to the way I usually did things that I astounded myself. What better way to experience the world, to absorb it and not be trapped in lists and what-ifs and limiting self-consciousness? I felt my fingers against the fluted glass of hot tea beside the gray waters of the Bosphorus. I stood still on a street of fabric shops and absorbed the call to prayer like it was a song made of wind. I photographed every sacred street cat I saw. I tried on clothes and danced to The Cure in a dressing room. I engaged in deep, drunken conversations with mystics in old bars. I chased ghosts by the graffitied walls of old Constantinople on Halloween night. Photos from that trip are so different from the dark-eyed hauntedness on my face and images from other trips to Istanbul. We made many sojourns there. I loved the city and was proud to know it was my second home. But my face on this trip, when my head was filled with stories, it's different. My eyes are mischievous and bright and open, alive, not guarded. The stories we live in our minds change the shape of our realities. We think in stories. Psychologists know this. It's why cognitive behavioral therapy has become the mainstay of therapeutic techniques, considered universally beneficial when so many other tools are strongly debated. CBT works by challenging the spontaneous, negatively habitual thoughts we've amassed as defensive patterns in response to the world. Narrative therapy is another psychotherapeutic process that is used to transform thinking patterns. We live and breathe and react through the stories we tell ourselves. Some are good, some are bad, but we have a choice, no matter how much it feels in the moment that we do not. I know that feeling of stuck, frozen immobility intimately. We can change, adapt, alter, and transform our stories. We really are the authors of our own life. Like defending my first written story when I was little, I will go to war over someone challenging my narrative. Many years ago, I was honored to share a space in a clinic with Jane Stewart of Journey Horse in New Mexico. It was my first experience with horse people who were more interested in knowing the horse than they were in chasing achievements and accolades. The atmosphere was quiet and natural and vulnerable. We shared stories and we were honest with each other. At one point, Jane explained that we needed to let go of our stories in order to show up in a better way for the horse. This idea incensed me. I argued back. I explained that as a writer, story was my guiding force. How dare anyone suggest I give up my story? It was like Jane wanting me to give up my identity, hand over my documents, and begin a new life in witness protection somewhere in the middle of Alaska. I hate the cold. I thank Jane to this day for her deep-rooted patience with me. She explained that the stories we tell ourselves don't need to be static. They can move and change and grow. The point is letting go of our attachment to our story so that we can see what lies beyond the mountains of our perception. We become so used to wearing the same story every single day that we forget that stories are like clothes. We can wash them, dry them, change them, or try on a new outfit altogether. We're not supposed to be stuck. In my podcast interview with Tamar Reno, she said, "Story is everything. It's how we perceive our relationship to everything. Humans for thousands of years have been programmed to think in stories. It's how we connect with ourselves, with other people, with the world around us. We think in stories. Language is the root of our story. And the language we naturally think in directs the energy of our stories. Tamar talks about how English is a static language. It's still and slow moving. It doesn't inspire action. English holds our thoughts like a snapshot instead of a movie reel. It's easy to get stuck there, motionless in our thoughts. Curiosity moves us. Inspiration sparks us. Questions encourage us to act. Asking the right question. It's Tamar's gelding first horse who encourages us to keep searching, trying on many questions for size until we found the right one, until we've landed on the right question. How do we know when we found the right one? Because you won't need to ask a different question, First Horse says. I wrote in my love story about challenging myself to see if I could hold an entire conversation in questions. Hint, it worked, and Christopher didn't realize I was doing it. Or he hasn't called me out on it yet. I don't know. Learning how to talk in order to listen was my first lesson as I launched my coaching practice the day the world locked down during the pandemic. We were frightened, uncertain of the future, wary of each other, and learning to use our senses in a different way, unable to read expressions beyond our masks. The only way I could show up as a confidant, advocate, and guide was by learning to ask questions, sit back, and wait. I learned to be patient with the pace of someone's story and to accept their stories as their truth. Questions are the roadmap of my sessions with clients. Questions can be hard or soft. They can create connection or divisiveness. They can be open or closed. The question I'm sure is right is rarely the one that ultimately allows a person the space to unlock the next steps of their story. Questions are alchemy. Questions are a moving, breathing art. Questions are my dance with the horses, myself, and the world. Questions, like all art, take practice. Through questions, I better know my story and decide if the narrative I'm living by still has my best interest at heart. Questions show me when I'm ready to change course, adapt, and move forward. Questions tell me when it's time to stay still and wait. Inquiry guides a creative life. I pull myself out of dark places by the light of curiosity. At first, it's a dull flicker like a distant candle in the window of a forest. If I'm brave enough to reach beyond my story and follow a path of questions through the dark trees, I don't mind the briars and the sticks that snarl me. I brush them away and move closer to the light. There's no certainty as I shift the perspective of my story. The distant candlelight might lead to an empty house, or it could welcome me into the warm kitchen of a kind character who invites me inside for tea and conversation. I won't know until I knock. What I offer you at the end of this month, this season, this transition, this year, is an invitation to sink into your questions. I welcome you to explore your story. You can do this in your thoughts or in your notebook, wherever it feels best to take a journey into and beyond yourself. Here are some questions to get you started. 1. What is a lie you told yourself and believed? Was the lie necessary at the time? What happens if you write the truth next to it? 2. Pretend you are a tree. What do you see? What do you hear? What is your story? 3. What does no feel like in your body? Do you listen to it? 4. What does yes feel like in your body? Do you listen to it? And 5. If you could live anywhere else, where would it be? Describe what your alternate home looks like. How do you spend your days? It's the season of shameless self-promotion. I'm trying to reorganize my relationship with gift giving in this end of the year rush. We made the universal decision in the farmhouse to take the pressure off. If gifts are under the tree on Christmas Day, great. If we're gifting each other in January or February, that works too. The gifts I value more than anything right now are time, experience, and support. The day before I visited with Jane Pike on her podcast, she sent out a list of beautiful, thought-provoking questions. One was, do I have anything to share? As I made a list of things I wanted the world to know about, I was surprised that supporting the arts was at the top of my list. Before horses, I sold art. But I've always been interested in the primitive and outsider art. I want to know what people are making on the fringes. I want to know what folk artists see. I want to know their stories. My farm is a collection of outsider artists in every medium. I am thankful for this well of creativity every day. And here's my wish list that I'm sharing with you. In your already overtaxed list of people's wants this season, I'm going to add to the burden by outlining ways you can support my work and my farm. If you have someone on your list that's hard to buy for, think of these suggestions as creative, eclectic, and outside the box. And the first is something new that I'm offering this season, and that's an archetype coaching session. And these micro sessions are 30 minutes in length, and they use a combination of beautiful cards and questions to assist you or your recipient in reimagining your story. They take place by Zoom, and the participant will receive a recording to refer back to as they make their way into the new year. And the cards that I use for these sessions are beautiful, and they're based in botanicals and animals, and it really gives us a chance to dive into symbol and archetype and what those overarching themes in our life might mean for us. The second thing that you can do is sponsor a horse. Many of our herd are seniors, and every horse at my farm comes to us with a story. They have a permanent home with us where they help people heal every single day. By sponsoring an individual horse, you become part of their care and support team. And sponsorships allow us to provide care for them that we might not be able to otherwise. It's a very huge part of our barn here. Another way that you can give back hugely to this community and to this farm in the holiday season is to subscribe to Stable Roots. Whether it's free, paid, or a gift subscription, you are helping support the heart of my writing and this little farm in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I have some exciting things planned for paid subscribers in 2025. And two other things. We're past the time for holiday delivery, but if you're not on a deadline, you can snag Bramblewood Stables merchandise or a calendar if you visit our website. Lastly, my wish list that I'm sharing with you. This item is absolutely free, and that is please share my work. Comment with your thoughts and spread the word on social media. It costs nothing, but it pays dividends in building my platform and allowing me to send the wisdom of my herd out into the world. Let's do everything we can do to share each other's art in this coming year. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for reading my stories. And thank you for being the light that draws us closer through the forest. I'll be hosting a Zoom call next week for all my paid subscribers. It's been a long time since we did that, and I look forward to seeing everyone there. Love, Kim.